Good morning, Mr. Pompeo, and thanks for your time.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Was the U.S. operation in Iran a surprise to you, or was it part of President Trump's plans and we simply didn't know about it?
I was unsurprised by the fact that President Trump chose to go after those three sites. He has, since I've known him, been determined to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. He tried to give them a path, a negotiated path, that they didn't have an enrichment capability, which gives them the ability to build not only a weapon, but a weapons program. And when they declined and continued to build and build and build, he went after a set of targets. That didn't surprise me at all.
President Trump appears confident that the U.S. bombings of Iran's nuclear facilities completely destroyed its nuclear capability. However, isn't it objectively difficult to know precisely what damage the airstrikes actually caused? Moreover, the head of the UN nuclear watchdog has estimated that Iran could likely resume uranium enrichment within a few months. What do you make of this story?
Yeah, I don't know the facts, obviously. We'll have to wait to see the data, the satellite stuff, and see what the world shares. But it's never permanent. So long as the Ayatollah remains in power in Iran, they will endeavor to fix their centrifuges, educate their kids to hate the world and the West, and try to build out a set of nuclear capabilities that threaten us all. So whether it's days or weeks or months that it was set back, they are far further from a nuclear program than they were just a few weeks ago. Not just materially. It's easy just to focus on how many centrifuges can they plug in and run. They are chastened, right? Their ring of fire, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria fell, right? All of these things have diminished the Iranian power in the region, and alongside of that have reduced the risk for the West. There's no doubt in my mind that as a result of what President Trump has done and what the Israelis have done, the world is far safer today.
But what is the endgame? First of all, what are the next steps regarding Iran now? Will there be an agreement, or could we see a new cycle of tension?
I don't know. You tell me. What's the Ayatollah going to do? Is he going to put his people in harm's way again and force the West to come back after his program again by continuing to enrich? If he chooses to do that, I promise you, the President Trump will go after the program again. He is not going to let them go build a nuclear capability, including enriching uranium or the plutonium facilities that they may have had. What's next isn't for the West to decide. It's for the people of Iran to decide. And I hope that the people of Iran will decide that this regime has failed them, that all the hundreds of billions of dollars that have been wasted on security proved useless in the face of Israel, useless in the face of the United States. And so they will adopt a model that is different, one where they want to be part of the world, part of the global trading system. They want basic property rights, basic human dignity. Those are the things I hope the Iranian people will choose. If they don't, and the Ayatollah continues to have his way, then I'm confident that this war is only at a temporary ceasefire or temporary pause, call it what you will, but that we will have to continue to put pressure on the Iranian regime to keep them from threatening European assassination efforts and the efforts to kill folks in the United States of America as well.
Would that change of the regime be an option? Is this among the U.S. expectations?
The U.S. is a big place. I'm sure different people have different judgments. My view has been, so long as this regime is in power and seeks to destroy the little Satan Israel and the great Satan the United States of America, and continues to conduct assassination campaigns in Europe, then we have a job to do.
In Gaza, what is the endgame there?
Israeli security.
In practice, how can we have an agreement, a solution?
Well, they could start by releasing the hostages, right? People have walked away from this story. They continue to hold hostages. That's their model for how they want to live their lives. These people are indecent terrorists. They're horrific. What happened on October 7, 2023 is unrivaled in my lifetime in terms of things I have seen. The horrors inflicted, the couple thousand people killed, the sexual assaults. It's just horrific. So everybody wants to know, how does this end? Ask the Hamas knuckleheads. Right? That's who you should ask. How does this end? This ends with every last Hamas warrior dead, unless they decide they're going to go live a different model, a life of peace and one for prosperity. They have destroyed the lives of the people who live in Gaza. Right? This wasn't Israel. Israel had not a single person inside of Gaza before October 7th. Not one. And yet somehow the UN and frankly too many Europeans blame Israel for the destruction in Gaza. Responsibility for this destruction is singular. It is the Ayatollah, the Iranian regime, which underwrote these terrorists in Gaza, and now much destruction and a really difficult life for the people who live in Gaza.
That's clear. What do you know about President Trump's relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu? Is it the best it could be, or have there been times when their cooperation was tested?
Oh goodness, I don't know of any leader that I encountered or that President Trump encounters that we didn't have differences. So there certainly have been with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as with many of our friends and partners, different nations, each trying their best to make their own nation great, and trying to find ways to cooperate together that deliver for better outcomes. That's certainly been the case, whether it was the movement of the embassy to Jerusalem or acknowledging the Golan Heights as properly the land of Israel. President Trump has done an enormous amount of work to make Israel stronger and its people safer. No reason to think that'll ever change.
Mm-hmm. President Trump had stated during the election campaign that he would end the war in Ukraine within 24 hours. Yet there is still no light at the end of the tunnel. What isn't working in the U.S. administration strategy towards Russia?
Well, this isn't the U.S. strategy. Europe has the war on its soil. So it's European strategy that has failed, in my judgment. I would argue, too, President Biden failed. He failed to deter Vladimir Putin. You know, for 4 years, Vladimir Putin did invade Ukraine. While I was the Secretary of State and CI Director, he didn't take 1 inch of Ukraine. He took a fifth of it when President Obama was in office, not an inch while we were there, and then went after it again. We lost deterrence. Putin didn't fear us collectively, the United States and Europe. And so the strategy has to be to restore that deterrence, to convince Putin that he's going to lose, that the costs of continuing the war exceed the benefits of continuing the war. And so that is multifaceted. That is a Europe and NATO working closely together along with the United States. I think the summit in The Hague, a week now ago, did that. I think Putin saw that and was disappointed. He was hoping for fracture and chaos. He got unity and more European investment in NATO. That has to be a setback for him. But we must end this in a way that convinces the world that Vladimir Putin lost and that Europe prevailed and that the West prevailed. That idea is essential. I'm convinced we can do it. We'll have to impose more cost on Vladimir Putin. We have many tools by which to do that. And the we isn't just the United States. The we is all of us who believe in human dignity and property rights.
So you mean that Biden administration should have been tougher with Putin?
Oh, yes. No.
Because
they did.
Some people criticize President Trump that he's not so tough with Putin.
Yeah. No, I've heard those critiques, not surprisingly. President Biden patted himself on the back for keeping Putin out of Kyiv. That was an epic failure, right? When Vladimir Putin rolls tank, we knew in September of 2021 that this war was going to take place. And we briefed I'm told that the U.S. intelligence community briefed all of Europe on this. And you know what the Europeans did? Nothing. They did literally nothing. And Putin did go invade. And that's a failure of the West, in a way that we haven't failed, frankly, since in a long time. And we need to restore that deterrence model.
Any ideas?
I hope that President Trump is successful in doing that alongside our European allies and friends. And I pray that President Zelensky is able to continue to defend Ukraine in the way that they have. They've done amazing work. They certainly have the most experience, perhaps the most highly trained army in Europe today. We're all learning a lot from how they have conducted this campaign and frankly, how the Russians have conducted theirs as well. No, the West has to win. And my critique of President Biden was he didn't let them win. He told them, you can use our weapons, but you can only fire them on your own soil. Basically, he said, you can fire these missiles, but they have to land in your country. That is not how you prevail. That's how you prolong misery.
So you believe that today U.S. is supportive to Ukraine in practical ways?
We're still providing support to them, even as we sit here today, continuing to provide support.
At the recent NATO Summit, President Trump made a statement that was not exactly a clear commitment to Article 5 of the alliance. He said it depends on how you define it. What do you make of that? Does the U.S. remain committed to NATO's collective defense clause?
Yes.
That's it. That's an answer.
It's the truth.
Yeah, we'll see it. Greece is among the 5 NATO countries with the highest defense spending. How do you perceive Athens' role in the region? To be more specific, is the cooperation between the two countries on projects such as Alexandroupolis still of value to Washington, and why?
Yeah, no, enormously valuable. Some of my best intelligence partners when I was the CIA director were Greek intelligence services. And then as Secretary of State working with Greek foreign minister was powerful. And you see it in the project that you described, Alexandroupolis, but you saw it in other places. You saw it in Crete. You saw it in our air forces working together in training missions, not frankly just here, but all across. We were deeply aware that this southern flank of NATO mattered an awful lot. As a Pompeo Italian heritage, the southern flank of NATO matters an awful lot. Certainly the migration issues present a security risk, but also our capacity to project power throughout this region and the Middle East depends on close cooperation with the Greek government. And I think President Trump and his team, including me, did that well for those 4 years. I don't see any reason that will change during this term of President Trump either.
Meanwhile, Turkey is working to warm up relations with Washington, seeking tangible results, such as Ankara's return to the U.S. F-35 program. The Russian S-400s, of course, remain on Turkish soil. How do you see U.S.-Turkey relations and Trump-Erdogan relations shaping up?
We pulled the program during our first term, the F-35 program, because the Turks and the Turkish government made a decision to use Russian air defense systems when they're a NATO ally. That made no sense to us. And we didn't convince them to give up the S-400, but we imposed real costs on them for choosing not to do so. I think President Erdogan is trying to figure a way back into good graces. But the truth is there's an easy answer to how to get there. That is, be cooperative and work on NATO missions alongside of that. I was heartened to see the Turks, when 2 new countries wanted to join NATO, squawk a little bit, but ultimately permit them to enter NATO when they could have certainly delayed it even more and perhaps prevented it ultimately. But they chose not to do that. Every European country has its own interests and speaks them loudly when they come to Washington, D.C. It was always the case that in the public statements, they would talk about the EU, and in private, they would talk about the things that their country needed. And that's proper. That makes perfect sense to me, right? You're the prime minister, you're Prime Minister Mitsotakis, you're the prime minister of Greece. You should be looking out fundamentally for Greece as part of Europe. The Turks are no different in that sense. They're just more vociferous about it. And then they have an element inside of Turkish leadership that, frankly, doesn't really want to be part of the West. And that's the piece that we have to convince Turkish leadership consistently, and probably for the next 50 years, have to convince Turkish leadership that they belong as part of the West and to be part of the Western trading system, part of the West security apparatus, and part of a Western model of civilization. When we are all successful, that the Turks will have a very successful nation, and I'm confident
without
that the Turkish
S-400s,
and hopefully without S-400s or any other Russian weapon systems. Yes.
In Greece, many are wondering what President Trump would do in the event of an incident with Turkey in the Aegean. Do you have an opinion?
Well, we had one when we were there the first time. There was a collision at sea, if I recall correctly. We were pretty clear. I imagine this administration will do the same. It's hard to answer without knowing the facts of what you're describing. But the president understands the importance of the relationship between the United States and Greece. He worked on it in his first term very, very hard. He's early on. I'm confident he'll work on it again in his second term too.
And the last point, overall, how would you characterize Trump's foreign policy doctrine under the slogan, America First? Isolationism with a good dose of interventionism?
President Trump's not particularly ideological in the truest sense of that word. He is a pragmatist. You might put it in the realist camp. He understands the enormous value of deterring adversaries. And we saw that in Iran. We've seen it elsewhere too during our time when chemical weapons were used in Syria. We fired Tomahawk missiles at the targets, the places the chemical weapons came from. President Trump is unafraid to use American power, military power, diplomatic power, economic power to achieve America's ends. And my observation from the first term was that never meant America alone. Yes, we wanted Europe to spend more money on its own security. Yes, we wanted our South Korean partners to spend more money on their own security. We were determined to get them to do that for themselves and for our collective defense. No reason to think that will change one bit. He will continue to push and push and push. But when it comes time to deliver, and America is needed to deliver good outcomes for the American people with our allies and friends, I never saw President Trump shrink away from that.
Thank you, Mr. Pompeo.
Thank you very much. It was great to be with you.